Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Holly, and I am for full sake of transparency, transgender woman who was born in the Midwest. I guess Missouri to be exact, if it matters. And welcome to my first episode, I say, of a podcast series that I've been wanting to make for the last couple months. And I do want to give a quick disclaimer. I am pretty sick right now, and I'm recording in my car on my on my iPhone microphone. And I'm doing that because, well, first of all, I don't have any other microphones, and also I wanted to record while I was doing things because I feel like I think best when I'm out and about, and I'm definitely no epic podcaster entertainer. So yeah, welcome. It's nice to hear from you, and this isn't going to be like a regular podcast episode, or at least it's not going to be like an essay with a beginning, a middle, and end, a rising action and a climax or anything like that. A lot of it, especially for this first recording, is just going to be my thoughts, and I may or may not post this. I guess if you're listening, you probably will hear because I posted it. And I really just needed a way to get my thoughts down the first time and just kind of like get a bunch of information out into the world, and so I can see it and maybe make some more structured episodes later. Yeah, so today's topic. So I am 26 years old, and I had something happen to me a couple years ago. It was I would say a couple things happened. One about 3 years ago, and one about 2, and both were horribly traumatic events for me. Things that I had absolutely no way of processing, no way of understanding, no way of feeling anything about. And in the wake of that, I developed what I personally believe is a case of DPDR. And I want to just say a quick disclaimer that I've not been diagnosed. I have talked with my psychologist. He has told me that he believes that a form of particularly intense dissociation is sort of what's happened to me, but he's not a labeling type. But I still don't really think that the official diagnosis matters as long as this information makes its way to you and you find it useful for yourself. That's always how I've thought about it. It's like I don't really care about the diagnosis itself, but if I use ADHD tips in my life, then that's helpful. I don't need to necessarily have the diagnosis to use the things to make my life better. So, yeah. And in the following couple years, the best of my knowledge, I developed a case of DPDR. And if you're happening to listen and you're not super familiar with DPDR, you may think you have it, but you don't know a lot about it. I'll give you at least my opinion on what DPDR is. So, DPDR is a dissociative disorder, and at least the way it's experienced at first, without any other perspective on it, in my opinion, is that it sort of feels like, or I guess I'll break it down into 2 parts. So DPDR stands for depersonalization and derealization. And depersonalization is kind of like feeling like not yourself anymore. So you don't really feel your emotions, you don't really feel your reactions to things necessarily. You don't really feel like you just kind of feel like you're watching someone else interact with the world in a certain sense. Like you, almost like if you were to watch, like, let's say you're distracted and you're watching like a character in a TV show or a movie, and they're like doing something for the plot, right? They're out golfing with a friend, or they're out doing whatever the hell, and you just see them doing things, but you're distracted, you're not fully invested, so you don't really feel anything in response to what's happening, right? You're not really invested in it. It's almost like that, like you're watching a movie that you're not invested in. It's kind of a weird thing to define, but I think when you're in it, you sort of know that you're in it. Or at the very least, you have an idea. And so the realization is, I think, a little more sensory in my opinion, or it's a little more like tactile in its concept, where like reality sort of doesn't feel real anymore. So like other people don't feel quite as like real, or like they don't feel quite as tangible, or they feel really opaque to you. Or not opaque, sorry, translucent to you, where they're like, it's hard to explain, but it's just this like qualia that's missing in other people and things. Like you see things and you don't have a reaction to it. It almost has a visual component where things just, you almost feel like you're in a video game or something. Those are a lot of the like surface details and surface symptoms that people report with DPDR. And I have a lot of opinions on what I think DPDR actually is, or at least insights, I guess. And I think that those descriptions are like the surface symptoms in some ways, but I think when you change your perspective of what DPDR actually is, those symptoms will sort of make sense within a broader picture, and I think they'll stop feeling like symptoms as much. And I'd love to explain a little more on that later. So anyway, that's what DPDR is. You can also look it up. Most of the internet will say the same thing. And so yeah, at like 24, 23, I had a couple really bad events happen. And in the wake of those, I've never felt more of a stranger to life and more panicked, more anxious, more mentally unwell than the following year from what happened in 2024 to me. And I've experienced a lot of things. Quick trigger warning, but you know, one of the things that happened in 2023 for me was that I had not encountered death much in my life. Not really with my family, not really with, you know, friends or people I knew. I mean, I'd had like distant family I didn't really know that well, but I hadn't experienced death firsthand. And I had been living with a gay couple at their house for a while, and I was going to school in Missouri, college, and we were pretty good friends. Like we had really spent a good amount of time with each other, and you know, it was part of my daily routine, and I cared about the guy. I mean, I was still young and dumb, and we butted heads sometimes, but I still cared about him. And sorry, I'm navigating traffic. And again, trigger warning, death. One day from school, I came home and I knew his car was home, and I called out for him when I got inside, and I didn't hear anything. I heard the bathroom water running, which was strange, the sink water, and the door was slightly cracked. And when I looked inside, my body knew he was dead, and he had had sudden heart failure. He had been an alcoholic for quite a while. He had some edema on his legs and things like that, and I didn't understand how dire that actually was and how bad his health was until he was gone. And I'd found him. I had to pull him off the toilet he had died on and try to revive him, even though I knew he was dead. And it was a really, 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 really rough time in my life. And honestly, it still haunts me sometimes. I talk about it in a very casual way, but I think it's more because it's pretty intense, and sometimes it's hard for me to connect with emotionally. But anyway, so where was I? I guess the thing that I was kind of getting at was that man, that's crazy how that made me lose my train of thought. I mean, who would have thought? Yeah, so I explained what DPDR was. I guess I'll edit this part out. I explained what DPDR was. I talked about the experiences in my life that had happened leading up to that. Oh, right. I was just saying that I'm no stranger to terrible events, and then I explained that. So, yeah, I would say that even in the darkest parts of that moment of discovering him, it didn't feel anywhere near as terrible as the first day of DPDR did to me. doesn't just feel like you're floating through life. It feels like nothing feels right, nothing feels good, nothing feels motivating. And while that doesn't sound terrible on the surface, it sounds like depression. It's got a different quality than depression. I do think that with it comes depression, very intense depression. But I think that it almost feels like you can't breathe every day of your life. Like you haven't, like the day that DPDR happens, you can't take a breath until the day you're out. It's terrible. It feels like you're drowning all the time. Anyway, you pull into this parking spot. Made my way to a park in downtown Denver. We're close to downtown Denver. And you can probably hear my power steering. I need to put some fluid in there. But unfortunately, I'm extremely unmotivated today. So I'm just going to let it scream at me. And I'll give it a nice talk and some parental love later. Okay, so anyway. So I've told you a little bit about what I think DPDR is, or at least what DPDR is by definition, and a little bit of what I think about it, and a little bit of my story. And I think the place I want to go to today is I want to explain something really fundamental about people that I don't think we understand. So when you grow up, when you grow up and you're developing as a little human, you kind of learn implicitly, right? Because when you're a little human, you just have emotions, right? It comes naturally to you. You kind of learn like implicitly through watching other people where your value system comes from. And so like as you're growing up, you have ways that sort of shape your emotions to a specific value system. So, you know, as kids, we are kind of born in I think a more intuitive way of seeing the world. So something bothers us, we get angry. Something, we're hungry, we long for food. We see something funny, we laugh. We see something pretty, we smile. Whatever, right? And depending on the way that the people around you believe in the world and react to your emotions will kind of implicitly shape the way that you see the world. So let's say you grew up in a religious environment in the Midwest. We're going to go back to my background for this one. So if you grow up in the Midwest, one of the predominant mindsets of the Midwest is that kind of a Christian mindset where there's like a sort of standard that you should meet that, to be honest, is completely arbitrary. And they say it follows the Bible, but most of the time it just follows interpretations individuals have about it. But people basically, one of the things people believe is that you have free will. God gave you free will and choice. And you can always choose good choices and bad choices. And so let's say you choose to masturbate. That's a bad choice. Let's say you choose to get angry, right? A lot of the time, Christians will make you feel ashamed of being angry because in the Bible, one of the deadly sins is wrath, right? One of the sins that, along with things like lust and pride and things like that, those are sinful. And so they'll often judge you pretty prolifically for that sort of thing. And it is so cold out here. I did not come prepared today. I'm just in this short sleeve fall thing, and it's 60 degrees in the park and buffeting winds. So I think I'm going to go for a drive instead. So forgive me as I walk back to the car, but I might be a little distracted. Anyway, so in this mindset that Christians have, they'll judge you for things. So let's say you're depressed and your house is out of order. Okay. You are going to be judged for that. People will try to tell you you need to be better. They'll tell you need to do this. Let's say you get angry at someone. Okay, now you're wrathful. All these things that come naturally to children, very naturally, are now punished by your community, right? And this might be your whole community. Like, this might be your family, this might be your friends, this may be your church community. Those might all be the same thing. Who knows? It's the Midwest. And so what happens is you sort of implicitly learn that there is a right way to be, a better way to be about the world. And what that essentially does is makes you chase things that are not your natural impulses. And so you might get angry, but you will cover that up with shame. You might get, upset, but you will cover that up with people pleasing, compliance. And to you, your value system, or what you value in life, oftentimes then sort of becomes this chase to hit those values. Now, your value system can be anything. If you grow up with parents who treat everything that you feel as sacred, then you're essentially just going to value who you are, right? So if you value, let's say you're angry as a kid, and your parents say, whoa, like, that's cool, what are you angry about, And they just treat your emotions as something important, noteworthy, but they don't form judgments on those emotions. Back in my car. And they don't form judgments on those emotions. Then you're naturally going to just feel like you yourself are valuable. And how this ties into DPDR for me is very interesting and very difficult to understand while you're in it. So the reason I'm saying all this, when you dissociate from something, and this will connect in a second, when you dissociate from something, it's often because you have no way of coping, right? When something hits your nervous system so hard and you have no way out of it whatsoever, you have no way of coping. There's nothing that you can do to convince yourself that it's safe or whatever. You dissociate because it's too much for you to handle. And it's the only way you can survive. That's essentially what dissociation is. There's a whole nervous system thing about it. I am no expert, so take these words with a grain of salt. Do a little research yourself. But from what I understand about it, there's layers and reaction states that your nervous system can have. And one of them is the dorsal state. So it's so overwhelmed that it almost shuts down, right? And you would think that would be on the lower activation, but it isn't actually. It's on the higher activation stage. One of the highest, actually. And that's also what a lot of people think depression is, actually. It's somewhat of a dorsal reaction. But again, that's just my understanding of it. It's the one that's worked for me. There may be more accurate clinical, just clinical explanations. That's just the model that works for me, whatever. And so with that in mind, anytime that you have DPDR, it only makes sense logically to say that it's because there is something happening to you that is so overwhelming that your nervous system has absolutely no clue how to deal with it and has shut you down. And I think what is so confusing to people with DPDR, at least what was confusing to me, was yes, the event happened, right? So the thing where my roommate died happened. A thing a year later where 3 of the closest people in my life basically were manipulated by a predator away from me while I was naive at the time. I definitely did some bad things then too, but essentially that's what happened to me. I knew that those things were bad, but in the past I'd had bad things happen to me. And I'd always been able to deal with it in some way or another. And what confused me was that I got far away from the situation, and yet I still felt dissociated. Nothing I could do could make me feel better. Well, I think that's where the value system comes in. So, for someone who grew up like me in like a Baptist upbringing where you feel like you have free will and you can make all the right decisions, and when you don't, it's a character flaw, but ultimately you are in control, you can build your character. That is a very, very lacking in nuance worldview. And what I mean by that is, so you don't have to believe what I say, but here's what I'm going to say. What those events taught me at that point in my life was that no matter how much I trusted someone, no matter how much I trusted my own perception, because I very much trusted my own perceptions of things at the time. I very much trusted myself in the way that I understood and reacted to things. I had been completely and utterly tricked in a way that I had never experienced before, manipulated to the point where it broke my reality apart. I didn't know that was possible, or even why someone would do that. And at that point, something within me broke in a way where that old worldview, where I thought that I could control things, that I was in some level of control over my destiny, right? Like there was a certain level of uncertainty, like, oh, I don't know what I'm going to eat for breakfast today. But there was a overall certainty that I am capable in any given situation of, making a living for myself, being loved by people because I'm awesome, whatever. And so that broke those expectations for me viscerally in my body, because then I started asking all these questions like, well, if I can build everything up and lose it, what's the point? Or I started asking like, well, I thought I knew all these things, but obviously I didn't. So do I just need to learn something else? Because in the past, when I'd had a traumatic event, right, one of the things that I would do to recover from that traumatic event was be like, okay, I'm not there anymore. I'm not in this state anymore. I'm not, I'm far away from that. I've understood where this comes from. I can avoid it. Well, I thought that too about the last thing. And now it happened again. And so when I completely thought that I was in the safe, in or whatever, and it turns out I wasn't safe to the best of my judgment, then all of a sudden, how the fuck would I ever know again that I'm safe? And those were the types of thoughts that rang through my mind all the time. Like, how would I know? Because I felt confident before. Anytime I feel confident now, it's like, well, there's so much that I might not know. And thus began my journey to completely peeling back that old worldview. And what I realized, not at the time, but what I understand about it now, was that the old worldview gave me a sense of agency. So bad things would happen to me, but I felt like to a certain point, I just had to learn enough about the world and eventually it would just be better. And, having that belief kind of made it true in some ways, where the more I learned about the world, the more that I made it a safe place. But it was never able to completely eradicate everything. And so, in a certain sense, I believed I had control and agency before. And after the event, all of a sudden, no matter what way I could think about it, I could never justify feeling safe or confident again, because I felt it completely in my bones before, right? And one could say, well, I could just learn again. What happened this last time? What happened again that, how do I learn from this one? But it's like, well, I did the same thing last time. How did I learn from that one? I learned, but it didn't help me. And so I felt, and I didn't actually put two and two together as to what was happening. I just knew that I felt chronically out of control. I felt like I had absolutely no agency in my life. And anytime I wanted to try to do something in the way I used to, it made no sense, because even if I wasn't thinking about those things I was anxious about, all of a sudden nothing felt achievable. And that seems crazy, right? I would want to go to the gym and work out, and I would feel anxious. I would feel incredibly anxious, because anytime I would be like, all right, I'm going to go try, in the way I understood trying something, I felt like, well, I have no idea what's going to happen. I value this thing, going to the gym, but I don't know if I'll be able to go to the gym. I might get injured. I might do this. I might do that. And in a certain sense, that was true. And I had no clue what was really happening or what was going on. And I spent the better part of the next year trying extremely hard. I mean, ruminating 8 hours a day, trying to understand, how the hell do I know I'm safe in anything? How the hell? And I kept looking at all these things, my girlfriend was nice and kind and understanding. Okay, does that mean that, she'll never hurt me? Or my mom is awesome and has been here my whole life. Does that mean she'll never hurt me? And my brain, no matter what I did, could always come up with reasons that were very different from early in my life, that those bad things could still happen no matter what I did. And that was a struggle to me. And I had never lived in a world that I could conceive that there was no control, ever. I had never lived in a world where I'd had to think about that, understand that, grapple with that, anything like that. And I think by that time I had already, not believed in Christianity anymore. So that is something to note. But I had no concept whatsoever for living in a world with no control. I thought that was the point, right? You define yourself by the things you choose to do. So I define myself by the partnership I choose to cultivate with my girlfriend. I define myself by the time I choose to go to the gym. And, I am awesome because I don't get injured, because I know how to avoid injury. I've done my research. And learning very quickly that the things that I used to judge my life and the quality of other people's lives on was actually dependent on chance and not what I thought it was. All of a sudden, anytime I tried to do anything, anytime the old value system kicked in, the things that I valued in life, or was taught to value in life, anytime that was true, and I thought about that. So, I was I want to go to the gym. To me, going to the gym just felt like a thing you do. But I actually was attempting to find worth or value in that. And the reason why I was so anxious every time I went to do it was that, sure, it would probably work, but I knew on a visceral level in my body, in my mind, in my heart, that might not happen. And so if I define my worth by all the things that I choose to do, and at any time I feel like anything I choose to do might not work out for any given reason, then all of a sudden my value in the things that I chase in, the value in external things doesn't connect anymore. Nothing feels valuable because nothing feels real. I cannot grab anything anymore because fundamentally I'm not in control of those things to grab. I hope this makes a little bit of sense. And so this took me a very, very long time to reconcile with. And I understand for you people who suffer with DPDR, there are some of you who have suffered from this condition for years. And I understand that. Many years, 10, 20. And I am so sorry for every moment that you have spent like this. No human being ever deserves that. It doesn't matter what you've done. You do not deserve that. But for me, it was 2 long years of feeling like I was drowning every day and not feeling like I wanted to do anything, and nothing felt motivating, nothing felt good. The only thing I felt was this underlying sense of dread that I couldn't quite identify. And of course I just forced myself to do things anyway, because you kind of have to live. You can't just sit there. And I think that was part of what helped me understand all this stuff about DPDR, was the things that I did in order to, keep moving. But yeah, ultimately, it was 2 extremely hard years. And I want to wrap all that back to the symptoms of DPDR. So the symptoms you feel are depersonalized, right? And I think that is very easily explained by this framework. So let's say you felt like some level of control in the external, right? Let's say you placed your worth in external things that you do, right? And that's almost a misnomer, because you still feel that worth internally, but you're defining it by what you choose to do. You just think that you have control of what you do, right? And so, in a certain sense, your worth is internal to you, but it's because you believe that your worth internal can be expressed through the external. And so, maybe your personality is grasping for those things, grasping for those things you think bring value to your life. And all of a sudden, you don't believe in your soul, in your bones, in your marrow, that you can actually do those things anymore, then all of a sudden the things that were you, the things that you did, that grasped for, that made you, you don't feel like are yours anymore. You can go do it, you can try, but that's not you. It's not this internal stable sense of something. It's something that can be taken away. And it's helplessness. And I think the thing is, it's not a very conscious thing. You just suddenly feel this way when you go to do something. You just feel nothing but an intense, deep, suffocating dread at anything and everything that you choose to do. And that would explain a lot of the facets of depersonalization. The person you thought you knew, you can't express that anymore because you don't believe that it belongs to you. Or, you don't react to things anymore because you would really only react when you completed the thing that you did. So you would set a goal, and when you completed it, you'd feel good. When you set a goal, or you set a thing to do, and you felt that inching towards completion, you would feel something about that. And now you don't viscerally feel like you're inching towards any kind of completion. You don't feel like you're inching towards anything. You might do something, but it doesn't belong to you, so you don't feel anything about it. You might think and feel these things on a very, very unconscious level now. And I think that it feels so unconscious, or it is so unconscious, simply because what has changed for you is a deep mechanical worldview change. And I think one of the reasons why it's so hard to understand and step outside of the world of DPDR is because this is like incredibly developmental. It is like baked into your bones. It's baked in probably into your DNA from generations of the same mindset in some ways. And so essentially, passing a protest, essentially, that's why it's so freaking hard for people when they're in DPDR to understand what the hell is happening, because it makes no sense. It is a complete contradiction to the whole way that your world is, the whole world view that you have. Anyway, so what the hell is the answer? And this is incredibly difficult to me. It's very simple, but incredibly difficult to understand or do on an emotional level. So let me just, I guess before we move on to that, let me just quickly explain a little of something. Or let me go back and kind of wrap up my DPDR understanding and where it comes from. So essentially, DPDR is a deep and persistent loss of control, because I think you have, one of the classic things is the existential thinking and feeling like you've seen behind the veil of life. In a way you have, right? You're not necessarily seeing something new and esoteric that other people don't see. I mean, a lot of people don't see it, truthfully. But there definitely are people who do. Visit any person who practices Buddhism, and in some ways they'll probably think similar to you. There's plenty of other people who have experienced similar things, who've gone through it and have managed to adapt better, or just people who were born to parents who already understood these things and taught them how to deal with it in a constructive way. But the idea behind DPDR is that it is a deep loss of control. And you might look around you and you might see people around you who go through a traumatic thing, and then they seem to come out on the other side okay. And you're like, why can't I come out on the other side okay? Well, it's because they are able to find a way to keep up the delusion that they are safe. They have not seen through that. They don't, and to them it works, right? It's not invalid. It's not dumb. It's just how they've been taught and how it works. It's probably why you feel like such an outsider, if that's something you feel. I mean, that's something I felt, is that my own partner sort of believes this way, that she has a level of control over the things she does in her life. And I mean, to some extent, she sort of does, at least to her. But to me, it just doesn't seem that way. And it can be a little isolating and hard for people to understand you. But long story short, DPDR is, in my opinion, a deep loss of control from something that has contradicted your worldview in such a way that you can no longer find a way to justify that worldview. You feel it in your bones. It has upset something fundamental about how you see the world. And in a certain sense, all you know, especially if you grew up like me, all that you know is judging a life based on the actions and choices they make. And so one of the things that is really hard to get over and will keep you stuck for a long time is that you will see yourself being depressed. You will see yourself, not doing the right things, making the choices that make you look attractive to other people, right? You will see everything that you do through the lens of judgment that you've lived in from your community, your friends, your family, your whole life. And because of that, you'll judge yourself. So you'll see yourself in depression and you'll feel panic because you feel like, oh, well, my friends aren't going to like me if I'm depressed. Or you're going to feel panic because, I'm not going to do good things, like I can't contribute to the world, my life is worthless because I'm depressed. I'm not able to make the choices that make me valued anymore. And you're probably going to feel like that for a while because if you're taught the way that I was, you cannot conceive of value in someone who, maybe you can conceive a value in someone who's depressed, but still makes good choices. But you can't see the value in someone beyond their choices. And so the way out is very, very non-intuitive and very difficult to understand. And I hope you forgive me if this is a little rambly. I have absolutely not, this is kind of my first try at getting all of this stuff down. And honestly, I'm still in the very early stages of understanding and working through this stuff myself. Like, I'm sure I'll come to new insights later that maybe contradict some parts of this or just make it a little bit easier to understand. But yeah, so essentially, it's extremely hard to get out of DPDR because it's hard to find a way to see value in anything because it's your value system. It's the thing that you reach for beyond the actions a person takes. And I think what's so interesting and what's so hard too is that so much of our society, so much of everyone around you is also still going to be living from that value system. So you might see how your depression is pushing your friends away. You might see how the things that you're struggling with are pushing others away. And that is very hard to reconcile with. How on earth are you supposed to accept yourself or accept any part of this new reality if that's the thing that you're getting, if that's what's happening? And I won't lie, this is one of the hardest parts of DPDR and why it is so ridiculously difficult to get over. Because life is inherently relational, and the ways that you relate to yourself and others are really where all your value comes from. That's it. I mean, obviously, besides being hungry and eating, that is valuable. As beings that are a little bit farther beyond an animal, who have things that go a little bit farther beyond just animal instincts, those are the only things that seem to really matter in life, because you will just die at the end of it. And I think if you have DPDR, you know this very viscerally, that you are just going to die one day and everything that you have built will go away. And that is very hard to reconcile with. And so here you are feeling absolutely paralyzed, feeling absolutely nothing, feeling terrible every day, feeling no motivation, feeling like you're suffocating. And now you have to grapple with these huge existential things. And I think that some people will be like, oh yeah, if you can just, accept the DPDR and not be scared by it, it'll go away. And in some ways, I think it can go either way. Sometimes I think if you're lucky, not really, I don't think it's actually lucky, but I think if you, happen to come across it in a specific way, you may be able to ignore the DPDR symptoms long enough to go back into the delusion of control and put a lid back on it. And that is how some people cope. And there's nothing wrong with that, but I don't think it's going to be helpful for them in the long run. I think eventually they'll just enter another episode, and that time they won't be able to get out. I think once you start seeing through this stuff, it's very hard not to see through it anymore. And then the other direction is taking all those things that we've looked at, the worldview, the value, the way that you understand reality, and instead of sort of sitting in that old value system, finding a way through, finding a way to hold all of that and find some level of control again. So I think something fundamental to humans is that they do actually need control in a certain sense. They need some kind of control over something. Because ultimately, right, being a human means valuing things and pursuing those things. That's it. That's all life is. It's just valuing things and pursuing those things. And in one sense, you have a value system that relies on you feeling in control to pursue something in the first case, like when you're growing up. And now you've realized you can't control anything external, but you still need to find something consistently valuable to feel okay with life. And if nothing outside of you is controllable and everything is uncertain and you don't feel like you really own any of those things anymore, how the hell do you find control? Well, that comes down to shifting your value system. And that's going to be so unbelievably difficult because it's so non-intuitive and it's not going to come to you very quickly. And I honestly think that this is something that people do not talk about. I think that maybe one of the only people I've seen online that actually talks about this in reference to DPDR is Robin Schindelka. She's a YouTuber. I think she's from Norway or the Netherlands or something. And when I first listened to her content, it honestly didn't help me much because I was so unaware of what was going on in my mind and body that I couldn't really grasp the concepts. Now that I'm closer to the other side of it, I think her content is brilliant. I think she truly grasps what it means to have DPDR. But something that has felt very vital to me is basically if you've grown up to value one thing your whole life, it's going to kind of feel like that is reality. Like that is the only thing you've ever known, is chasing after external things, chasing after certain actions and things that you do. That's going to feel like the only way to be. And so because of that, it's not going to occur to you that, in my opinion, I think it's somewhat arbitrary. Here's why. So this is probably the most difficult part of all of this to talk about or explain. So you might have to give me some patience. And it might be all over the place, and I'm definitely going to have to refine it. But that's okay. So there's basically only two ways to look at value in life, right? One is in the choices you make, the things you acquire, and the things you do external to yourself. That can be value. And that is what the majority of our society chases. That's why we have capitalism. That's why we're so greedy and so hungry and things like that, because that's where our worth comes from. That's where this spiritual sense of importance comes from for most of us. This deep knowing deep inside that we're important, which is partly why it feels so empty on DPDR, because then you just realize that well, I'm just going to fucking die. What's the point, right? It doesn't matter if I acquire a ton of wealth. That's just a temporary earthly distraction. Anyway, besides the point. So there's that. Okay. And then there is the other way, which is value inherently in who you are. And if you've lived your whole life from the first thing, then the second thing is going to feel completely foreign and almost goofy to you. And you have to forgive me. I'm kind of losing that train of thought, and it's probably because it's difficult and I'm driving. Yay, stoplight. So I see a guy with a cool motorcycle helmet right now. kind of jealous. I ride too, and I love them. Love motorcycles. So, man, I really lost that train of thought. Right, so there's two ways of valuing the world, and we just described both. The first one being finding value in the things that you can define yourself through the external actions and things you require. The second one being finding value in who you are in a given moment. And that is so foreign and difficult when all you've known is judging, right, based on what you do. And so if you were to try without any guidance, I think the second method, you would probably be like, what the fuck am I doing? Because like, you're naturally going to be like, well, why would I, like, what is there to appreciate about someone who's depressed? And that right there is a hard fucking question to answer, my friend. Here's why you feel that way. You only feel that way because you have been taught that. Because you have grown up with a judgment system that is supposedly supposed to make you feel superior to others via the choices and control that you find in life. And so you look at someone who just lays in bed all day, maybe like yourself if you have DPDR, because holy shit, this shit's hard. There's not a lot of energy left for anything else. Then you're going to essentially not be able to find value in that by thinking the way that you used to. And here's how you learn that it's arbitrary. And this may not be very helpful to you, because I don't feel like I have practiced and understood this enough in my own life to really convey the idea to someone else in words that will help them understand. So I, apologize if this isn't quite enough yet, but I'm hoping to explore this enough in my own life and really sit with the idea long enough that I can portray it to you better. But if you take ego out of it and you simply look at the judgment you're making, you're saying this person's boring. You're only saying that because you feel like being entertaining is doing things. But that's only because you feel that way. It's partly because you've been trained to feel that way. If you were to find a way to let go of the judgment that you have, the value that you find in thinking about someone's actions, and instead you were to think about, let's say like a quick thought exercise is change your brain to instead focus on how, think of them like a child. Think about how, okay, here's a person who is suffering really bad, usually if they're just laying in bed all day, who is suffering because of something that they don't understand and can't get out of. And often it involves some kind of struggle that they have valiantly faced off against for years. And if you think of them that way, all of a sudden, you can almost frame it like a movie, like a hero trying to fight against the big monster and struggling. All of a sudden, their actions aren't meeting what you used to think was valuable, but then you can be inspired by the way that they are fighting for their life, for their struggles. Even if they're unpleasant to you, maybe they're a jerk because they're going through something and they don't know how to control their emotions. But then you can have compassion for that instead. And if you see that in a compassionate lens, then all of a sudden, when they're a jerk to you, it's no longer a threat. It's not a threat to you or your worth. And if it's not a threat to you or your worth, then you can see them for what they really are. And if you can see them for what they really are, and you can extend that non-judgment in your interactions with them, then all of a sudden, you are valuing them for what they are in the present moment. Without judgment, everything in the present moment becomes fascinating and okay. Maybe not perfect, maybe not joyful 24/7, but fascinating and okay. And all of a sudden, if you apply that to yourself, and here's one of the most interesting and fundamental assumptions at the bottom of all of this, in my opinion, is that the moment you apply that to other people, you will apply that, or you must apply that to yourself. Because it's not you or someone else, it is a value system. It is the thing that you find valuable about this life and about yourself. And if you start, instead of judging yourself for everything, you actually manage to accept yourself exactly as you are. Just the act of accepting yourself then makes the moment to moment with you, even when you're laying in bed on your worst days, or your partner or your friends are laying on the bed on their worst days. All of a sudden, there is no threat to you. There's no problem. You're not bored. You don't think that they're annoying. You actually think that they're very interesting, and you can meet them just like you meet yourself with a radical love and acceptance, and that feels really good. The first time this happened for me was on shrooms, and that's probably why it's so hard for me to explain, because it is something that is very egoless, and living in a world concept of control is very ego-centered. And so the first time I did this, I was amazed, because my girlfriend was laying in bed, like, really depressed, and I all of a sudden felt like, and I had been practicing this a week before, I was just so happy to be there with her, because I was meeting the whole world with love. It was an arbitrary choice, and I could see how arbitrary it was, and I was suddenly just meeting the world with that love. And I know it probably sounds like a bunch of baloney, because it's just like, oh, choose differently, but it's true. Once you see the world that way, it unlocks something in you. Because now you've realized that there is that value systems are arbitrary. You only chose to value your actions because that's what was taught to you growing up. But if you look at the world and you look at everyone, you actually start to realize that every single person on earth has an arbitrary and different value system. If you really think about it, right? You might say, like, one of the things that I was always like, I found hard at first was like, well, I think that everybody, I think that there's generally a set of things to do in life that make you likable, make you good. But then I started to realize that, like, that's entirely arbitrary, because yes, like, there are going to be outliers that think the opposite, right? Outliers that think that when you're a shitty person to most people, that you're doing good things. But then there are also, within the majority of people, small deviations and variations. There's no consensus on what is good or what is bad, even though people might think there is. It's just a kind of a lie that has been taught to you since you were born. That's why it's so hard to stop believing. So, finally, I hope you've stuck with me here. I hope you've felt like you've gotten something so far. I just got home, so I'm probably going to get out of the car and continue this as I walk inside. Because it's hot as hell in this car, even though it's a really cold 60-degree day outside. So thus, for me, after all of that, ensued the struggle of practicing acceptance. Because when your instinctual gut reaction is to judge, forgot my matcha, is to judge yourself for things, and all those things are outside of your control, then every single day, no matter how hard or how much you're able to accept one day to the next, you're going to encounter situations that make your body and your mind panic. So, like, I'm on my good days when I feel great, I might be able to accept things quite easily. I might be able to meet myself with open arms easily, because I feel in some ways that, my family and friends who might not think the way that I do see the value in me. And, hold on, door alarm, or door lock. But then what happens when you're having a bad day and all you want to do is lay in bed? That old judgment system is going to scream at you. It's going to say, we're not doing enough. Your friends are not going to appreciate you. Whatever. Oof, kicked a glass. They're going to say, like, oh, your friends are going to leave you. They're not going to enjoy you. They're not going to think you're a valuable person. Your girlfriend's going to get bored of you because you just want to lay in bed all day. or you struggle too much, or your emotions are too much. And again, it's going to feel really real to you because that's the way you've lived your life so far, is that you've had those thoughts about other people and yourself, right? Because every judgment you make is a reflection both ways. And so when you meet that judgment, you're going to have to, and here's the hardest part. Acceptance is a choice. It's not something that will ever come naturally to you. I mean, it will if you choose it enough, right? But it's not something that is a passive thing, at least at first. It's something you have to learn to give yourself. So the only way to feel good and the only way out of DPDR is to accept yourself as you are. And one of the things I've struggled with is that I'll start to feel super shitty. I'll be like, oh my God, I feel like ass right now. Like I feel like I'm, not showing up. My girlfriend's going to be whatever. I get all those anxieties. And then I try to accept myself in response. And that is so insidious because that's not accepting yourself. Acceptance isn't something you try. It's a recognition that you have. And so if I try to accept myself, all I'm doing again is trying to meet some external standard rather than enjoying and meeting the person that's in front of me, no matter what state they are, with love and acceptance. And God, it's going to be so counterintuitive because you're going to find moments where you're a jerk to somebody, sort of. I mean, you're not, that's subjective, but you're going to feel like, according to your old value system, that you're being a jerk to somebody. And what's funny is that, let's say you just say something kind of rude, or you're feeling on edge, so you say something and it comes out really upset, to them. In the old worldview where you judge people based on their actions, that's going to be rude. It's going to be hurtful. But the interesting part is, if the person you said something rude to, is somebody who practices acceptance and sees the world in this way, then it won't hurt them. Not really. Because they know that they contain the ability to do that and that they deserve love regardless. It's a choice they make. And so they're probably not going to feel particularly threatened. They might hurt a little bit, but it won't hurt in the way that it would hurt before on a personal level. It would just be a little painful of an experience. But they're most likely going to meet you with love. And that is one of the hardest things to get over with DPDR, with this whole thing, is that no matter what you do, you're lovable as you are. Because there is no other choice. There's no other answer that will ever make you feel good. Because if you ever judge any set of actions you take, you will fundamentally be betraying the fact that you are a whole and complete human who is capable of anything that anyone else is, and that any circumstance may happen to push you there. So if you think, like one of the things I struggle with as a transgender woman born in the Midwest who now lives in Colorado, is that our country politically is using me and my identity, trans people in general, as this political martyr. And they are doing their absolute best to escalate tensions. And it's honestly a really scary world. And one of the hardest things that I've felt, and one of the most radical things that I've had to understand in order to feel better, is that people like Donald Trump, and I say this in a very light way, are the same type of human cut from the exact same cloth as you and me. And the moment that I judge Donald Trump is the moment that I am judging my own judgment within myself. That's one of the things that I think liberals get extremely wrong, or leftists get extremely wrong, is that they get so upset at people like Donald Trump or political opponents, and they call them idiots, they call them morons, and they get so upset and they judge the hell out of them. They say they're worthless people, they're pieces of shit. And what they don't realize they're doing is that Donald Trump feels like he has to feel better than everyone because he has no self-esteem. At the core of it, I truly believe that people like Donald Trump feel like they need a hierarchy, someone to throw under the bus in order to maintain power, because power is what they chase, the thing that makes them feel good. It's an external thing to themselves. And essentially, I have had that within me my whole life as well. And if I were to judge him for that, even though his shows up in I think way worse ways than mine did, if I were to judge him for that, then I fundamentally am never going to accept me in my own past, because every person is capable of that. And ironically enough, I think the reason why people hurt each other is because of judgment. That's it. Judging themselves and others for judgment. It is a self-perpetuating cycle. And I hope that makes some level of sense. But like, oftentimes when you externalize something into the world, this is something that I think is very interesting, and this might be the next topic, is that anything that you externalize into the world is usually a fundamental reflection of something you don't accept within yourself. So basically, this is a really difficult topic, and this might be for the next video or the next podcast, or episode. But essentially, if you can't accept naturally, right, something about you, if you feel like you are not valuable, if you do some sort of action, then you will naturally judge others that way too. That is how you work, like structurally, mechanically, that is how human beings work. And so the moment that you start to judge Donald Trump for judging, you will also judge yourself for judging. And then you will feel like shit, because DPDR will tell you that you can never stop judging, that you can never meet the standard that you're making for being a good person within yourself. So the hardest thing for me is not judging myself and meeting myself with that compassion, no matter where I am, no matter what thing I do that feels terrible. And it's so funny, because when I'm able to slip into that mindset of not judging, it feels so good. Not because I'm being a good person, because it feels good to not judge. And so, like, for instance, my girlfriend was depressed the other day, and she was just laying in bed. And instead of being mildly annoyed at it, I felt accepting. And so, like, not that me being mildly annoyed was bad, it's just I felt accepting. And so then, all of a sudden, I felt very confident in myself, because I felt like my own value was there regardless of what I did, and so was hers. And so even if she rejected me, even if she did whatever in the moment that would have felt bad to me before, I didn't take it personally. I just took it as a thing, and I didn't judge either of us for it. And all of a sudden, she could feel that undertone underneath every interaction we had. And I managed to bug her in a silly, fun, affectionate way enough to get her out of bed and take a long motorcycle ride in the cool, crisp air, and take her out to get ice cream and check out a cute shopping strip in Golden, Colorado. And then we came back and we played a video game for the rest of the night. And all of a sudden, it's like she was depressed. She wasn't contributing much. She was just sad in there. And she wasn't contributing much compared to like what I used to think was contributing, right? When I used to think was like valuable, she wasn't doing. But I could see all the value in her and all the value in me, regardless of what she was doing. And that seems so nebulous and so hard, but I think if you truly follow the things that I've talked about in this podcast episode, you will start to understand what I mean. And that right there has profound implications on healing from DPDR. Because if you can give that acceptance to others, then all of a sudden, you will feel fundamentally worthy just for who you are. And instead of your worth stemming from the things that you do in this world, the things that you do will actually blossom from your innate sense of worth. And you will suddenly feel motivated to do things, not because they give you worth, but because your worth creates the doing and the joy in the moment of doing. That right there, I believe, is the magnum opus of DPDR. And I truly believe that on the other side of it, it will feel like a gift. And of course, if you judge it from the side of judgment, it will feel like a curse. And I think that reveals something very profound about the nature of life if you sit with it long enough. And boy, is this the most difficult process I've ever gone through in my life, even with all of these revelations and all of these realizations about the things that I've done my whole life. And even with all this clarity that I found yesterday, I had an absolute breakdown in the car because my girlfriend and I went to a flower shop, and I felt like I needed to perform. I felt like I couldn't accept myself as I was. I was so worried. I was like, what if I accept myself as I am, but then my girlfriend can't accept me? And then I kept feeling like, well, this is not helping me. I need to accept these things. I need to accept my girlfriend. I need to accept myself. And then the moment I felt like I needed to accept something, I wasn't accepting it. It's hard, man. It's brain twisting. It's strange for people who've not lived this reality. It is intense and difficult and truly the strangest thing I've ever done. So that is a long episode. I've been talking for over an hour now. I think this would be a good place to end it. And I think it would be good for me to maybe do like breakdowns of these topics or something like that as time goes on, make more episodes and things like that. I also am going to be ideally finishing creating a blog that I've been working on, a DPDR blog, where I write these episodes down as scripts that you can read, and people can make comments and like talk about these things, discuss them, whatever else. And I'm hoping to share that on the DPDR subreddit and any other DPDR forum or community I can find. I truly believe that this is a spiritual disorder, and thus it is not going to be understood very well clinically because those things don't tend to mix. And I think it's spiritual, not in like the God way, not in the Christian way, but in a very different way. And I just think that it is very unique and difficult and requires a lot of time and flexibility of mind to get through. And I am so sorry. I am so sorry for everything that you have to go through. I mean, it's not my fault, but it's like a sympathy and empathy sorry. It's a, I don't know, it's a fundamental recognition of your worth and the things that you're going through. And I hope that this video finds you well, and I hope that this audio, this episode finds you well. And I very much hope that you get something deep from it that can help you to find a way through. So anyway, my name is Holly, and I don't really have a channel name. I don't really have a podcast name or anything like that, and I don't really think I need one. I'm not really here to get big or popular. I'm really just here to try to spread the information that has saved my life. So, if you do get any benefit from this whatsoever, please let me know if you can figure out how to contact me. I'd love to hear your experience, because I would like to learn more about this disorder, this problem, not really problem, this like spiritual suffering that we go through. And I don't know, I haven't really thought about this much, but if this is something that you're interested in, or you happen to have a lot of money or something like that, I am a little poor right now. I'm trying to support my girlfriend through med school while recovering from DPDR, and it's extremely difficult, and I've had so much trouble finding a job. So if you are interested, I would love any donations you're willing to give, but I'm not asking for them. I'm just kind of letting you know. So anyway, my name is Holly, and I really hope you have a good day. Thank you.